a very good morning to you and to Sam Basaki and James Savundra. Right, we're going to start with Ipswich. They've been busy. It's been a busy 24, 48 hours. There could be 3 new signings coming in. Let's start with Armando Broja. So they're in talks with Chelsea over a loan deal. A good move for him?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important for him to get guaranteed game time at this stage in his career. He's been unfortunate in the last few years with injuries. When he was just about to kick on in 2022-23 season, he had that cruciate ligament injury that kept him out for half of the season. It kind of trickled over into last season where there were so many players, so many changes within Chelsea as well. He wasn't really able to find consistency in that side. And he's the type of player that he isn't going to score a goal every single game, but he's the type of player that will always guarantee hard work off the ball, pressing defenders, he links up play really well. And I think it will be really good for him to go to Ipswich with the signings that they've got coming in as well.
I think we need to bear in mind just how disappointing that loan spell was at Fulham at the end of last season. They were very excited about getting him in the door, but because of what Rodrigo Muñoz did in the second half of last season, he didn't start a single Premier League match. 81 minutes he played in the Premier League last season. He played such little football that Fulham actually had to pay Chelsea a penalty fee because they didn't start him for 10 matches or so. But he did really impress on loan at Southampton a few years ago, and that's what Ipswich are probably looking at. If they can get him to rediscover that type of form that we saw in that spell there, because he's had a really difficult time, as Sam says. He had that horrific injury which ruled him out for pretty much a year. Mauricio Pochettino spoke really well about him at the start of last season, suggesting he could have a really big role to play last year, but things didn't materialise under Pochettino and things haven't worked out at Fulham. So it feels like Chelsea would like to sell him in this window. He's got 4 years left in his contract, so they're willing to listen to offers, but it doesn't feel like anybody's willing to make that big step and sign him permanently. I think they want to see him on loan, and potentially if things go well, then maybe Ipswich look to extend it if they do end up signing him.
I think it won't be as much of a risk as everyone's trying to make out, mainly because of his age and the fact that he has got Premier League experience. Like, when he did make that move to Southampton, we saw, yes, he scored 9 goals, but the impact he had for their side, everyone expected him to kick on. It didn't necessarily work out because of the injuries and the size of the squad at Chelsea. But I think that if someone really puts their trust into him and says, you know what, you're going to be our out-and-out striker, similar to what Pochettino did, but because the pressure of winning and having a forward that scored goals, I think that didn't work out for him. But if he goes to Ipswich now, he's surrounded by a team that plays to his strengths. I think it'll be a really good signing for them.
Right, well, I said Ipswich have been busy. After months of negotiations, they have agreed a deal thought to be worth up to £10 million. This is with Blackburn for their striker, Sammie Szmodics. He's completed the medical and announcements expected soon. So if they get the deal done by midday today, just in time for transfer talk, he could be playing against Liverpool tomorrow. What a steal also, James, up to £10 million.
I think it really is. He's somebody who was the top scorer in the Championship last season, 27 goals, and he's not an out-and-out number 9 either, so those numbers are absolutely incredible, and what he did for Blackburn's cause, keeping them in the Championship, was remarkable. And he's spoken about wanting to become a Premier League player, and now it looks like he's going to get the opportunity. A brilliant couple of seasons he's had, 3 seasons at Blackburn, was so impressive at Peterborough as well before that. And it feels like, when you consider the fee, 9 million potentially rising to 10 or 11 million, it feels like a no-brainer for a lot of clubs in the Premier League. Very low risk for that amount of money. Somebody who's proven in the EFL, not necessarily in the Premier League. But you do think, why did Ipswich quibble with that fee for so long? Bear in mind, it is only going to be £9 million, because I think Blackburn was frustrated with how long these talks took, and for the sake of £2 or £3 million, perhaps they could have got him in earlier in pre-season, rather than, if they do register in time to play tomorrow, I don't think he'd start. He'd come off the bench. It might take him a few weeks to get up to speed with Kieran McKenna and his methods. But I think it will really help support Liam Delap, who's come in with a point to prove from the Championship as well, and that will ease the pressure on him to be the number 9, if he is the number 9, with Szmodics hopefully contributing some goals to help their cause.
Given the stats, are you surprised that more clubs haven't been in for him?
Yeah, 100%. I think he's the perfect signing for a club that's definitely come from the Championship. When these type of players, obviously the age that he's at, 28, he's got something to prove. He wants to take that step up. Similar to Broja, but on the other end, they still have something to prove. And I think that those are the signings that are really key and important for teams that have come up from the Championship, because sometimes you see teams going for the big names, the people that want to stay in the Premier League, and sometimes it doesn't necessarily work. But I think this signing could be such a key signing for them staying in the Premier League.
The other player on his way in is Kalvin Phillips, and completed his medical yesterday ahead of the loan move from Manchester City. When we broke this news yesterday, all the guys were so happy. I mean, he's a likeable character, isn't he? But also a fresh start for him after what was a difficult time last season.
Yeah, a really difficult time it's been for the course of the last 2 seasons when you consider just how few games he's played in his time at Manchester City over the course of 2 seasons. Yes, he had the loan spell at West Ham, started 2 Premier League games, and that happened in May of the season before last when Man City had already won the Premier League title. And that spell at West Ham just went so badly wrong for a number of different reasons. He was sent off against Nottingham Forest. He was at fault for a couple of the goals there. Only started 3 Premier League matches at West Ham, and that really led to him eventually, after so long Gareth Southgate was so loyal to him, eventually had to make a decision to cut him out of his England squad, which was tough for Southgate. And Southgate spoke at the Euros about England lacking a player like Kalvin Phillips, and I think he could make a real impact. What's quite telling is the fact there was a lot of Premier League interest, and yes, Manchester City will pay a portion of his wages, but the fact that he thinks that the best place for him to be is Ipswich under Kieran McKenna rather than other clubs with perhaps proven Premier League managers with proven Premier League squads, it tells you something in itself.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's been unfortunate seeing him not get the game time, especially from what we saw him do at Leeds under Bielsa. He was such a key player for them. We've seen what he done for England, and we always talked about that position being a hard position to find in the Premier League and in world football. So the fact that he wasn't able to really stamp him, it was always going to be difficult at Manchester City. But then when you saw it at West Ham and you're thinking what's happening, but you can tell when you've had 2 years at City, you've only had 31 appearances over those 2 years. You're seeing your team, win trophies, but you're not contributing. It's going to affect anyone. Then you're going to West Ham. They're challenging for spots for Europe. They've got a good squad as well. So even displacing someone in their squad is going to be difficult. So I think he needs a team like this to almost prove to himself, I can still be that player, and prove to everyone else I'm still that guy, basically.
I mean, you'd be happy with these moves, wouldn't you, if you're an Ipswich fan? You've been having a look at the business that they've done so far, haven't you?
Yeah, Ipswich back in the top flight for the first time in more than 20 years, and they've been really busy recruiting and preparing for their first season back in the top flight after back-to-back promotions. It's worth bearing in mind. Did some business early. They signed Amari Hutchinson permanently from Chelsea following a really impressive loan spell last season, and they recruited from the Championship with the signings of Jacob Greaves and with the signing of Connor Townsend as well from West Brom. Both players will add depth in the defensive ranks. Ben Johnson, he's likely to come in as a starter after signing as a free agent. Liam Delap, we mentioned him earlier, he's impressed in loan spells in the Championship, but this season will be a huge step up in the Premier League. Ipswich showing a lot of faith, spending an initial £15 million to sign him from Manchester United. Manchester City, it could rise to £20 million. Now, Aro Muric, he's got the number 1 jersey after joining from Burnley, and there could be even more signings on the way. As we've been discussing, Kalvin Phillips will have a point to prove if and when his loan deal is confirmed. Ipswich will hope to have him in the squad for tomorrow's game against Liverpool, as will Armando Broja if he comes in after that long-term injury, terrible loan spell at Fulham. Still work to do on that deal, but Sammie Szmodics, he's nearly through the door. He said he wanted to play in the top flight. It looks like he'll now get that opportunity. But Phillips aside, there's not a huge amount of Premier League experience there. Liverpool tomorrow, Man City next weekend. This squad is going to be tested very early. Sam, what have you made of their business in this window? And it really is a balancing act, isn't it, for clubs when they bring players in, because you want to stick with the core that got you there, but also you want to bring in players that can help you stay there. Yeah,
I think it's probably the hardest job to do in the Premier League when you're talking about teams that come from the Championship going into Premier League where the big clubs are spending, but you're now seeing teams like Bournemouth and Crystal Palace Newcastle putting so much money into players. It's like, how can they compete? And I think now you're seeing with Ipswich, they've almost had an approach of, we're going to try and get some Premier League experience, but also players, like we said, have a point to prove. And I think that's for my own opinion, I think that's the best way to do it, because we've seen teams like Nottingham Forest a few years ago under Steve Cooper sign so many players, made it so difficult for him to find that balance, and then they almost got relegated. We saw QPR a few years further back, and they were signing players that, wanted to stay in the Premier League, Rio Ferdinand, Julio Cesar. We were thinking, what's he doing at QPR? And it worked against them. So I think Ipswich are trying to find that balance, and the signings that they're making, everyone has a point to prove. They want to prove that they can be in the Premier League. And I think if McKenna's able to get the balance right, I think that they'll do really well.